From theCUBE studios in Palo Alto and Boston, bringing you data-driven insights from theCUBE and ETR. This is Breaking Analysis with Dave Vellante.
At this week's AI Agent Builder Summit, hosted by Scott Hebner of theCUBE Research at SiliconANGLE's Palo Alto studios, the hype around Agentic AI, autonomous software agents that can orchestrate complex tasks, was on full display. We had demos and keynotes, and they painted a bold vision of AI-driven business processes. But scratch beneath the surface and a sobering reality emerges. That is that most enterprises are far from ready to reap the benefits of fully autonomous agents. A lot of work needs to be done to realize the promise of agentic systems, including organizational alignment to create a true data culture, cleaning up data silos, harmonizing that data, the whole concept of data ownership, data product, data as product thinking, getting governance and security right, choosing technology partners that make sense, and rationalizing your SaaS and on-prem application portfolio, and of course, all the change management that this entails to get all this done. Now, starting the journey toward an agentic enterprise is an exciting imperative, but in our view, it's going to take the better part of a decade to actually realize. Hello and welcome to this week's theCUBE Research Insights, powered by ETR. In this breaking analysis, we put the summit's optimism into context. We examine why enterprise adoption of agentic AI is on a slower trajectory than the hype would imply, and we'll update our yellow brick road to agentic, i.e. the stepping stones required to get to the promised land of agentic automation. Okay, let's take a look at the too long don't read. These are the 5 headlines, if you will. Let's start with hyperscale CapEx. It's exploding. Now enterprises, i.e. on-prem enterprises, they lag the big 4 cloud giants, AWS, Google, Microsoft, and Meta. Those companies are going to pour $300 billion or more into AI data centers this year alone. Cloud AI adoption, yeah, it's a rocket ship. On-prem enterprise, however, for AI is not going to reach escape velocity until the latter part of this decade. The second point here is 2025, I'm sorry for all the predictions, it's not going to be the year of the agent, it'll be the year of agent marketing. Look, co-pilots are wonderful, but our research shows that more than 85% of enterprises still need major upgrades in data quality. And the other 15%, probably don't know that they do. Maybe there's 5% of organizations out there that really have their data act together and are doing the type of integration, governance, and security that's necessary before agents are actually going to be able to fly solo. I mean, in the meantime, they're going to do some cool things and drive some productivity wins, but that big vision is going to take a long time to unfold. Now, we've seen this movie before. Take cloud, mobile, and social. The last decade was really preparing for this decade. Cloud, mobile, social, and big data. Take the first 3. They delivered largely on their promises, but big data really didn't. Why? Because companies tried to pave the cow paths, essentially, with shaky data foundations, and the risk of repeating that mistake with agents is very real. Fourth here, the yellow brick road matters. In previous episodes, we laid out 5 milestones. Essentially the data backbone, which was typified by cloud data warehouses, Snowflake and BigQuery and others, unified data and metadata management, harmonized data and processes, orchestration to enable those workflows to be malleable versus rigid, hard-coded processes and microservices, KPI-driven agents that can interpret the top-down organization goals and act with confidence. That's kind of the nirvana. That is sort of the Wizard of Oz, if you will, behind the curtain. Progress is real and will be real, but the gaps are still glaring. Number 5, winners bridge hype and reality. The vendors who ship an end-to-end platform and customers who double down on data fundamentals are going to ultimately and eventually reap that 10x productivity prize that we always talk about. Everyone else, if you ignore the fundamentals, you're going to end up in proof of concept purgatory. Now, we know enterprises are leaning in, which is great, but it's still early days. The vendor marketing hype is far ahead of where customers actually are. Here's a small sample survey from ETR, just over 100, and it shows the impact or the survey was designed to assess the impact of DeepSeek, and one of the setup questions was this one. So it's clear that enterprises are not sitting on their hands. While they're cautious, they're adopting LLMs as shown here. They're paying for AI. 80% of the respondents are paying for AI. Again, small sample, but it's still indicative. They're tapping into AI APIs aggressively, almost 2/3. Many are experimenting with open source models to bring on-prem AI, particularly, we've talked about this a lot. The banks that we've been talking to in New York are many, if not all, are doing this, the big banks. Okay, about 39%, and then 27% are actually training proprietary models on-prem. Okay, that's not bad, but that's far from this agentic vision that a lot of the vendors are laying out. Now, what's behind all this? Well, we often talk about the data center supercycle. People don't like that word, but of course, we coined the term super cloud, so we love super cycle, super cloud, super chips. It's all fun. The data center supercycle kicked in earnest in 2024. What was essentially a perpetually roughly $200 billion business, this is all in data center spend, power, cooling, compute, storage, networking, et cetera. That business, again, around $200 billion forever, growing in the low to mid single digits, it exploded in 2024. Look at that, we've highlighted in red, to $350 billion. That's a 58% growth rate in a single year, which is going to continue at an accelerated pace for a decade. Now think about that. The market is growing from around 200 billion to $1 trillion in just over a decade. Now data center spend goes from that low single digits to a CAGR of 16% over that period. And the AI portion of that grows in the mid-20s with its CAGR. Well, infrastructure to support traditional workloads, i.e. x86, it declines steadily. You can see that in the brown bars. So let's step back, take the macro view. Say, if you don't understand the macro will get you. So there's really two sort of speeds of AI, if you will. There's the cloud, and then there's the AI on-prem, which is a long tail. And we've talked about this a lot, that data has gravity. Bringing AI to the data is something that makes sense. A lot of customers don't want to put their data into the cloud. They don't want to move their data into the cloud. It's too expensive, or there are a variety of other reasons, privacy, security, et cetera. So most Gen AI pilots today run in the cloud. It's lower CapEx, you got easy API access, you've got the tooling, you got plenty of GPU availability, even though many say they're constrained. You can scale up, you can dial down, all those wonderful cloud features. Now we think that on-prem AI stays niche until the skills, the tools, and the governance mature. I mean, today it's mostly a bunch of hardware. And the on-prem AI stack must mature for this to take place here. But it's a growing niche, as shown in the blue bars below. The light blue bar is the on-prem AI, and the dark blue is the hyperscale AI. By the end of the decade, or early next decade, the on-prem AI is as large as the previous cycle's spend overall. So it's real. It's just going to take longer to gestate. By our math, only about 20% of AI workloads will run in on-prem enterprise data centers by 2032. But again, the overall market will have grown by 5x in that time frame. As we said, the 4 hyperscalers are going to spend north of $300 billion on data center build-outs this year. Add in Oracle and others around the world, and that number is well north of 300 billion. We're talking about GPUs, TPUs, power, cooling, compute, storage, networking, the works. So companies today, they're dropping, think about that, well over $50 billion a quarter on AI infrastructure, and the result is really instant access to foundation models, vector databases, agent toolkits, again, mostly in the cloud. So the takeaway here is the cloud is moving fast, it's sprinting. When everybody talks about the pace at which this is all moving, it's because it's being funded by these hyperscalers, and it's going fast. Obviously, the enterprise AI, the on-prem AI, let's call that power walking for now. So they're not crawling, they're certainly not sprinting. So the leaders got to grab quick cloud wins and lay a long-term plan for that long tail in hybrid AI. So let's talk about the hype versus reality. And we've identified three big gaps on the road to agentic, and there may be more, but we're just going to focus on these three in the interest of time. Let's start with data quality and lineage. You know, we talked earlier in one of these episodes with George Gilbert. One bank found 6,000 table entries that defined what a customer was, right? We all know these problems. I mean, 6,000 certainly sounds over the top, but it's the problem of, and we often use the example of revenue. What is revenue? Is it ARR? Is it NRR? Is it bookings? Is it calendar year? Is it fiscal year, et cetera? And agents, they hallucinate when the ground truth is fuzzy. So focusing on things like master data management and lineage and a single source of the truth are the fix, but it's not trivial. Second point, integration and orchestration. Vendors promise end-to-end automation. They overuse the word seamless integration, and seamlessly sounds good. A lot in tech is not seamless. The reality is that decades of enterprise service bus, ESB initiatives, iPaaS, and all the glue code, it still can't stitch together a 360-degree view of an enterprise. You know, we're just starting to get there with the customer. You're seeing, you know, companies like Salesforce really try to focus on that. So agents inherit this mess. They don't magically solve it. So, you know, keep that in mind. Some SaaS vendors, again, as I say, are solving this problem within their domain. Think Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, you know, SAP and others are trying to add value within their domains. Others are trying to add value across domains. Take Celonis and UiPath. Celonis is suing SAP because it can't get to the back end data. That's concerning. If these SaaS applications become essentially walled gardens, we're going to have a harder time implementing true agentic systems across those application silos. And we're just going to create more application silos. Next point, the last point, governance and trust. You know, boards of directors, they fear security breaches, they fear bias, they fear compliance blowups, they fear rogue action. That is clearly puts up barriers, and early adopters, they've got to embed guardrails. You know, we call them kill switches. What's the kill switch? A human in the loop. But longer term, can the agents confidently and accurately learn from exceptions and the reasoning traces of those humans in the loop? Today, maybe, but it's not mature. First gen agents, they act like, you know, junior employees. They've got to be monitored, they've got to be trained, they've got to be audited. The bottom line is, the message here is get excited, but be pragmatic. 2025 is going to be full of a lot of small wins and pilot wins, but wide-scale autonomous agents need a far sturdier foundation before they scale. So that brings us to our yellow brick road of agentic AI. Let's revisit that. Let's talk about step one. You know, it's there. You get the cloud data platforms, the hyperscalers, you got Snowflake, you got Databricks, done tremendous jobs of separating compute from storage, but that's evolving. Databricks is separating any compute engine from any storage in open table formats. So that has shifted the market beyond just cloud data warehouses. So that creates really interesting governance challenges. How am I going to do my governance? Open table formats like Iceberg and Delta. So how are those governed? Are they you know, Polaris, which is open sourced by Snowflake? Is it Unity, which was open sourced by Databricks? Is it other companies like specialists like Alation or Informatica or Calibra or many, many others? So that becomes, you know, a piece of complexity that has to get managed. You know, other gaps, cost gaps, talent, this cultural resistance to thinking around this idea of data mesh that we put on this chart, this thinking of data as product. But before we even get there, unified metadata and lineage. I mentioned Unity, I mentioned Polaris. Horizon is Snowflake's, you know, proprietary, you know, governance catalog. Others that we talked about as well. The goal is a common language for data across SaaS, data lakes, legacy applications, something that NextData is trying to do, Zhamak Dehghani's company. They're trying to achieve. The gaps are here. There's no universal standard. There's trust wars between business units. we still sit in rooms and argue about the source of the data, and there's a lack of agentic standards as well. I mean, others are trying to put forth those. I mean, certainly Anthropic and Google and others have been vocal about that. Okay, the third step on the agentic is think about harmonized data and business logic. We're kind of jumping ahead here. It's actually the fourth step on this chart, but look at the Salesforce Data Cloud. They are actually doing some of the hard work to harmonize that data, as are companies like Celonis and Palantir leveraging, other companies are leveraging graph databases like Relational AI and Neo4j. Those are going to play a critical role in creating this so-called semantic layer. But we're essentially moving from tables and strings that databases understand to things that represent, real world. And to do that, you've got to have the semantics in place, and process is part of that. So think of processes not as hard-coded services that are rigid, but think of them as malleable building blocks. So processes become building blocks that allow agents to create dynamic workflows essentially on the fly to fit market conditions. That is a ways away, but it is what is going to drive that 10x productivity. Other gaps, again, redesigning decades old processes, not paving the cow path. And you've got multi-vendor lock-in, as we've seen, with the rift between Celonis and SAP. You've got that stovepipe data. Agent orchestration and guardrails. We talked about Google Agent Space, AWS Bedrock agents, Azure Copilot stack, ServiceNow's, workflow AI, Salesforce's Agentforce, all good. How are they going to work together? How will the data across all of these systems be harmonized? And then you got this nascent sort of app server concept for agent orchestration and governance that's still brittle. So again, big gaps: security, audit, deep connectors into every app for back-end business logic, metadata and process knowledge that have to be sort of inserted today. Very hard to make all that autonomous. And then the Nirvana, we call this the wizard behind the curtain. The Wizard of Oz at the top there is agentic automation. This is KPI-driven, autonomous agents that can interpret top-down goals and learn from exceptions and those reasoning traces of humans. And today you get pockets of this in call centers, in IT ops and sales coaching, a lot of, RAG-based chatbots, and certainly coding is an early use case that is showing lots of promise. But in the future, agents are going to be learning, they're going to be optimizing, they're going to be aligned to top-down metrics. So again, a lot of gaps here. You've got accountability, you've got measurements, you've got this continuous learning. So the key message here is each step is building on the last. Skip the data plumbing and your agent pilot is going to crash and burn. So let's look at the vendor landscape and who's doing what. Let's, broadly. Take the cloud titans, AWS, Azure, Google, throw in NVIDIA there. They're the picks and shovels. They're selling massive compute and model hosting. Microsoft's strategy, its edge is with OpenAI and its footprint in Office. AWS is trying to be the sort of Switzerland of models and give you the tools to build. They're all about builders. Google has got, DeepMind's muscle, and Gemini everywhere. It touts itself as the only hyperscaler with a true foundation model. We'll see what Amazon Nova has to say about that, but I think generally it's accepted that Google's claim is true. You got enterprise app giants. I mentioned Salesforce, ServiceNow, you got Oracle, building agents, SAP, Workday, et cetera, embedding agents inside their suites. That is clearly going to be, the modus operandi. The advantage is they own their own data, they own their own workflows, they understand the business logic, they have the metadata, they have the process data. Now they've got to do the hard work, as Salesforce is doing, to organize that in a so-called data cloud. But the risk we have here is we're going to have a dozen siloed SaaS and application players and a bunch of co-pilots and assistants and digital assistants and agents that can't seamlessly talk to each other. Let's think about the data and AI platform, Snowflake, Databricks, you got IBM in there. the whole pitch is bring your data and build agents here. Snowflake's going to do that in its analytic world. Databricks is trying to blow the world open and do it on any compute engine and be the best tooling possible and leverage its ML expertise. IBM's got Watson X and its services capabilities and many other companies that we're not mentioning here. Look, a must win is on governance and open extensibility. That's sort of table stakes. The startup and the open software world, OSS Swarm, LangChain, you've got companies like Adept and others. These vertical co-pilots are going to be born out of those. Cohere is another one focused on that. And then you got these horizontal frameworks that Celonis is trying to popularize. You got a bunch of VC cash coming in. Some of it's going to be glue. Some of it's going to be, a lot of it probably is going to be roadkill, or it's going to be M&A fodder for acqui-hire or higher priced acquisitions. But the buyers have to be cautious here. You got to differentiate between agent washing from real innovation. So you got to ask the vendors, how do you handle lineage? How do you handle security? How do you do rollbacks? What happens when something goes wrong? Can I audit the agent's reasoning? How do your agents play with other agents? So let's talk about, lay this out as a customer playbook and what to do now. First and foremost, you got to clean your data house. You got to invest in quality data, master data management, data catalogs. You got to figure out what your governance catalog strategy is going to be, how to govern those catalogs and make sure you've got the lineage nailed. You've got to harmonize these core entities, the data, metadata, the processes, or you're not going to get too far with agents. Sounds like big picture, but you got to start small and think about doing this in a way that's achievable, but then imagine scaling that across your enterprise. Next, you want to API enable everything. You got to have access to legacy apps. You got to push SaaS vendors for open hooks. You need hooks into that back-end business logic, the back-end data, the metadata, the process logic. All of that has to be discoverable. Agents are only as powerful as the systems that they can reach. So the third point here is think about governing first. Don't scale until you've got that right. Big data was a lot of wild west. That can't happen here. And it probably is going to happen, a lot of shadow AI, but that's going to create risks for boards of directors. So you want to stand up an AI center of excellence, an AI governance council. You want to run your own tests and your benchmarks and that you have control over, because it's so confusing sometimes to look at all the mumbo jumbo in the industry. You want to define your own guardrails. You want to make sure you have audit logs and human kill switches and human override policies in place in day one. And of course, all of this is about leveraging your proprietary data so that you can have advantage, not stuff that's trained on the internet, stuff that only you have access to. So you want to start small, you got to measure, you got to iterate. So what does that mean? You got to pick high value, low risk pilots, email triage, add some value right away to make people happy. IT ticket management triage, simple sales quotes. These are relatively low risk that you can track the KPIs before and post, and then you can prove the value. Fifth, and last but not least, you got to build talent and literacy, data literacy. You want to train staff on things like prompt engineering and agent orchestration. You got to treat AI like it's a new teammate. You got to coach it, you got to train it, you got to review its work. You have to iterate it, help it improve, let it grow. So you really also want to build out an on-prem AI stack or look for vendor solutions. And there aren't a lot of solutions for on-prem today. A lot of hardware, a lot of bespoke software. You got to bring it all together for agents to work effectively. So in closing, the bottom line is Agentic AI is going to reshape the enterprise. We're super excited as we shared at the summit, but it's not going to happen by magic and it's not going to happen overnight. The path is a decade-long yellow brick road that's going to be paved with data hygiene, process discipline, and a relentless focus on governance and security. So you got to stay grounded, invest in the fundamentals and first principles, demand openness, and do that in today's AI buzz is going to allow you to realize tomorrow's business reality. But those chasing shortcuts might find themselves lost in the poppy fields of proof of concept purgatory. I'm Dave Vellante. Thanks for watching. Happy Good Friday. Have a restful Easter weekend. I want to thank Alex Meyerson and Ken Schiffman on production, and on our podcast, Kristen Martin and Cheryl Knight help get the word out on social media and in our newsletters, and Rob Hof is our editor-in-chief over at SiliconANGLE.com. Thank you all. Remember, all these episodes are available as podcasts wherever you listen. Just search Breaking Analysis Podcast. I publish each week on thecuberesearch.com and SiliconANGLE.com. You can email me at david.vellante@SiliconANGLE.com or DM me at dvellante. Or by all means, comment on our LinkedIn post and check out etr.ai for the best survey data in the enterprise tech business. This is Dave Vellante for theCUBE Research Insights powered by ETR. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Breaking Analysis.